She comes with the paper, Foy. That is the whole of my offer. You cancel the bond, you take the girl, and you take the malt house trade along with her, because she is the one who has made it pay these 6 years, and we may as well so in a private room. And if I say the bond is worth more than a stepdaughter, then you may have the bond and no stepdaughter, and go into the sponging house at Michaelmas like a gentleman. Silas Bray, 7th Duke of Uffcombe, had come to the Wren malt house at Sturmish on the 11th of November to look at a kiln, and had been left standing in a cold passage by a maid who had gone to find somebody, and was now hearing through 2 inches of deal door a conversation he would still be hearing at 4 in the morning 11 months later. The Duke of Uffcombe would spend the better part of a year learning that a debt paid is not a debt undone, and that the second payment would cost him a great deal more than the first. 16 shillings a quarter under the London price, said the second voice, thin, quick, a man talking himself into something. That is what her malt fetched at the last market. 16 shillings, Pike. I have looked at the book. Everything comes with her, said Tobias Pike. There is nothing in this house that does not come with her. Fetch her in and let her hear it. She is not a fool, and she has no more choice than a horse. The door opened. Silas stepped back into the shadow of the passage, which he was ashamed of afterwards and glad of at the time, because he saw her face before she knew there was anyone to see it. She was perhaps 24, in a brown working gown with the sleeves turned back, and her forearms were marked from wrist to elbow with the small pale burns a woman gets from 12 years of a kiln floor. She listened to the whole of it standing up. She did not once let Foy. "You are selling me for £180, she said. I am settling a debt. You are selling me for £180, and you are throwing in 6 years of my work and the trade I built out of a failing floor. And you are doing it in November so that the new season's malt goes to him and not to you, which means you are also cheating him." She said it perfectly levelly. "I only want it said correctly, Mr. Pike. If a thing is to be done to me, I should like it entered in the right column." He put his hand on the door and went in. They came to their feet. Pike heavily, Foy fast, the way men do when they recognize a coat before they recognize a face. "Your Grace, I came about the kiln." Silas set his hat on the table. "Mr. Foy, you hold a bond of Mr. Pike's for £180. Aye, yes, Your Grace. Endorse it to me and I will pay you the whole of it in coin, at the Uffcombe office, before 4 o'clock. You will have your money and you will keep your name out of a sponging house, and you will go home to Sturmish and not come back to this house." "And the other article?" "There is no other article," said Silas. "There is a bond, and I have bought it. Go." Foy went. Pike stayed and turned the colour of a man who has just watched a bargain walk out of his parlour, and began in a rich confiding voice to explain how deeply he had been imposed upon, and how the girl had misunderstood, and how a stepfather's duty in these difficult times. "Mr. Pike," said Silas, "the bond is mine now. You owe the £180 to me. Say one more word in that voice and I shall call it in on Saturday." Pike stopped. Silas turned round, expecting, he was honest with himself about it later, expecting gratitude and possibly tears, and certainly the pleasant sensation of having settled a bad business in 4 minutes. Delia Wren was looking at him the way a maltster looks at a suspect sack. "You have bought a piece of paper, Your Grace," she said. "You have not bought me. I am aware of it. I do not think you are, or you would not be standing there waiting." She began, quite methodically, to roll her sleeves down. "You have paid £180 to a man in a hurry. Tomorrow my stepfather will still hold the roof, the door, the key of the meal store and the £14 a year that keeps my mother in her room, and I shall still be here at 4 in the morning turning the floor, because the floor does not care whose paper it is. Then leave. Tonight. I will send a cart." "My mother is upstairs," said Delia Wren. He had not thought of that. He would think of very little else for a long time afterwards. "She has been abed 2 years, she said. Her sight is going, and her strength went before it, and she is quite as clever as she ever was, which is a great deal cleverer than either of the men who are in this room. She cannot be lifted into a cart and rattled 9 miles in November, and she cannot be put anywhere at all without a settlement, and her settlement is in this parish, because her second husband's is, and her second husband is Tobias Pike. He knows all of that better than I do. It is why he is standing there smiling at his boots. Silas looked at Pike, who was, in fact, smiling at his boots. Then I will pay her keep, he said. Name it. £14 a year, and I have never seen a farthing of it, and it is not the money. She picked up the ledger from the table and put it under her arm, and stood in the doorway of that miserable parlour with the dignity of a woman in a court of law. Your Grace, you have done a decent thing in a hurry, and I am obliged to you, and it has changed nothing whatever. My mother is under his roof. While she is under his roof, I am under it too. That is the whole of it, and there is no clever way round it, and if there were, I should have found it in 6 years. She went out to the kiln, because the floor wanted turning. Silas Bray stood in a cold parlour at Sturmish with a bond in his pocket for £180, and understood that he had just paid a great deal of money to purchase absolutely nothing at all. £94, said Silas, is what the Uffcombe malting lost me last year, and my bailiff tells me it is the season, and the season before that it was the barley, and the season before that it was the men. Your bailiff is a good man with sheep, said Delia Wren. He is. Sheep will forgive you. A malt floor will not. She had come the 9 miles on the carrier's cart at 6 in the morning, and she walked the length of the Uffcombe floor twice without saying anything, and then she went and stood over the steep cistern for a long while with her hand in the water. Where do you draw this? From the mill pond. You draw it from below the tannery, said Delia. Every hide in Sturmish comes down that leat. Your barley is drinking it for 3 days, and then you are surprised that the county will not have your malt. Move the intake above the weir. It is 4 days' work and a length of elm pipe. She put her hand flat on the kiln floor next, and then went and looked up the flue, and came back with soot on her cheekbone. That has not been swept since your father's time. Your kiln is not drying, it is stewing. And your men are turning the floor at 11 at night because it suits their beer, and the couch wants turning at 4. That is 3 faults. That is £94, said Delia Wren. They settled her terms in the estate office with the door open, because she said a closed door in a great house was worth 6 months of talk in a small town. Paid weekly, she said, and paid to me in this room, into this hand, and I will sign for it. That is the first thing. Agreed. The second thing is that I will not take it in money. Silas set down his pen. Miss Wren, I have offered you a guinea a week, which is more than my bailiff has, and you have earned it before you have been paid it. And if a guinea a week walks into that house at Sturmish, said Delia, it walks straight into my stepfather's pocket, because I have no lock on my door and no standing to keep him out of my box, and I have watched it happen with every shilling I have had since I was 18. So you will pay me in things he cannot sell at the Ram, coals delivered to the door, tea, candles, a pair of boots at Christmas, and 2 afternoons a week of a decent woman to sit with my mother and read to her, since her sight has gone and mine is wanted on your kiln. He was a long moment answering, because he found he could not immediately speak. That is a guinea a week's worth of contempt for your stepfather, Miss Wren. It is a guinea a week's worth of arithmetic, your Grace, said Delia. Contempt is free. The intake was moved above the weir in the first week of December. The flue was swept. The men turned the couch at 4 in the morning, because Delia Wren was on the floor at 4 in the morning, in pattens and a sacking apron, with a wooden shovel, and there is no argument on earth that answers that. By the middle of January the Uffcombe malt was making 18 shillings, a quarter over the price it had fetched in the spring. The other thing happened at the Sturmish market on the last Saturday of the month, and Silas saw the whole of it from the door of the corn hall. Pike was selling barley to the parish overseers for the poor's allowance, and Pike was using a bushel measure with a false bottom, and had been for 2 winters. And it was Delia who walked up to the trestle in front of 40 men, and set the parish's own sealed measure beside his and filled them both. There, she said, 3 pence in it. Gentlemen, you have been paying for 8 bushels and carrying home 7 and 5 pence since the winter before last. You will hold your tongue, said Pike. I will not, said Delia. I have held it about a great many things that were only mine. This is the pause. They took his measure away and broke it in the yard, and the overseers made him repay £11. And Tobias Pike stood in the middle of Sturmish Market being laughed at by men who had bought his corn for 20 years and did not once look at his stepdaughter, and everybody noticed that he did not. "You have made an enemy," Silas said on the road home. "I have had one for 11 years. Now he knows it. It was February when Silas saw the book. She kept the Uffcombe day book in a clear round hand, and there was nothing in it he had not asked for. But there was a second book, a little stitched thing in a marbled cover, that came out of her basket that morning with the ledger and went back into it without a word, and one page of it lay open on the table for perhaps 4 seconds while she went to the window to look at the weather. Every line was the same shape, a date, a sum, and 3 words: Michaelmas, £6.10, not paid. Lady Day, £6.10, not paid. Malt sold at Sturmish, 9 quarters, my hand and my floor, £4.2, not paid. 6 years of it. And at the back, in the same hand, a total, carried down and recast every quarter as carefully as a bank clerk, of money that no court in England was ever going to give her. Silas Bray stood in his own estate office and could not for the life of him work out why a woman would keep an exact account of a debt she had no way to collect, or why the sight of it made him feel, for the first time in his life, like a man who had never once had to write anything down. "There is a lock on the outside of your mother's door," said Silas. "There is. I want to have it taken off. I want a fire laid in that room every morning from the 1st of the month, and a bell put in so she may call somebody, and I want to know what else, and I've been 3 days working out how to ask you without insulting you, and I have not managed it." Delia Wren looked at him across the estate office table. "Then do not ask me," she said. "Ask her. She is upstairs, not dead, and every man in that house has arranged her life over her head for 2 years as though she were a piece of furniture that occasionally coughs. Go on Tuesday. Take Mrs. Ivans and go up and knock." He went on Tuesday. The room was at the back over the meal store, and it was cold, and it was extremely clean, and Hester Pike was sitting up against the bolster with a shirt across her knees and a needle in her hand, turning a cuff by touch. "Your Grace," she said before he had spoken, "you walk like a big man in a small room. Sit on the chair. It is stronger than it looks. Miss Pike, how did you know it was I? Mrs. Ivans comes on Tuesdays and she comes alone. Also, you have been standing in my doorway for 11 seconds working out how to speak to a woman who cannot see you, and I have had 2 years of that, and I can hear it now like a clock." She bit off the thread. "You will want to talk about the lock. I want to take it off." "Take it off, then." "He put it there the winter I stopped going downstairs, and he says it is 'cause I might wander, and I have not walked further than that window in 18 months. She smoothed the shirt. "Now sit down and answer me a question, since you are here and it is my room. Ask it." "What is my daughter owed?" Silas thought about the little marbled book and the total recast every quarter. "A great deal," he said. 6 years of wages. Her father's malt house made to pay by her hands and the money drawn by another man. Her name off every paper in that house." "I could name a figure. I have been naming figures at this for 4 months. "Yes," said Hester. "You have. It is what you are for. God made dukes to sign things." She turned her face towards him, and there was nothing pitiable in it at all. "So here is the question, Your Grace, and mind it, because I have had 2 years lying flat to think of a way of putting it. What will you do when you come to the part of this that cannot be paid for?" He did not have an answer. He was aware, riding home, that he had not been asked so difficult a thing since his father died. That was the winter he stopped being a man arranging a business and started being a man with a reason to be at Sturmish at 4 in the morning. He brought her a shawl in February. It came back the same day folded with a note: "The coals are welcome. The tea is welcome. The shawl is what people give a woman they are sorry for. D.W., you are the most difficult person I have ever met," he told her. "I am the most careful person you have ever met," said Delia. "You have not had to be careful, Your Grace. It is not a fault in you. It is only a thing you have never had to learn, and I have never had a day off from it since I was 18. And if you had a day off?" She was quiet for a moment, with the shovel in her hands and the lantern between them, and something went over her face that he thought about for weeks. "I should sit down," she said. Tobias Pike came up to Uffcombe on the 20th of February. in his good coat, with a paper in his hand and £11 worth of public humiliation still fresh on him, and he was perfectly polite, which was how Silas knew it was bad. "I am giving notice, your grace, as is proper, to the gentleman who employs her. At Lady Day, the 25th of March, I shall apply to the overseers of Sturmarsh to have my wife removed into the parish workhouse as chargeable to the parish. She being bedridden and I being no longer able to maintain her, my circumstances having been much reduced this winter." He let that sit for a beat. "Unless, of course, my stepdaughter comes home to keep her mother as a daughter should, and settles herself respectably, in which case there is no charge on the parish and no application to be made. Settles herself with Foy. Mr. Foy has been unfortunate. Mr. Foy must find £300 by Lady Day or be taken by his creditors, and Mr. Foy would be a made man with the Wren Malthouse lease and the girl to run it, and he has said he will still have her, which at 24, and with those arms she may think generous." Silas was out of his chair. He got himself back into it, which took a great deal longer than standing up had. "You are selling her twice." "I am a poor man exercising his rights, your grace," said Pike, "and there is not one word in what I have said that a magistrate could touch. The wife is mine to charge to the parish. The daughter is nothing to you at law, and the paper you bought off Foy in November settles a debt of mine, and buys you no more than that, and I think, if I may say it, that your grace has known that since the day you paid it." He left the notice on the table. Silas read it 11 times that night. Lady Day, the 25th of March, 5 weeks and a day. At the end of it, either a blind woman went in a cart to the Sturmarsh workhouse, or Delia Wren married a debtor to keep her out of it. "My father bought things," said Silas, "at 4 in the morning on the Uffcombe floor, with the lantern on the sill and the barley going over under the shovels. That was his method. A living for the second son, a commission for the third, a settlement for the girl who was inconvenient. He bought my brother out of 2 scrapes and my mother out of 1, and when he died I found I had learned it the way you learn a family walk. I have been Duke of Uffcombe 11 years, and I do not believe I have ever solved anything except by paying for it." "You paid for the elm pipe," said Delia. "That was a good use of money." "That was your idea." "It was, and it was still a good use of money. Do not go the other way and decide that everything you buy is a sin. It is a tool, your grace. It is only that you have one tool and you have never had to look in the box." They stood a while at the sill, the two of them, and the pail came up over the malting roofs, and the smell of it, hot barley and wet stone and smoke, was, he thought, the smell of the best 3 months of his life. 5 weeks, he said. 4 and 4 days. Delia. "When this is done." "When this is done," she said, "ask me something that is not about money, and I will give you an answer that is not about arithmetic. I have not got one to spare before then." Her hand was on the sill an inch from his, and she did not move it, and neither of them moved for perhaps half a minute, and that was the whole of it, and it was a great deal. He rode to Sturmarsh on the 4th of March and bought her. That is what he did. He phrased it to himself as a settlement, and his attorney phrased it as an indenture, and the whole thing took 9 days and cost £250, and every hour of those 9 days he could have gone to the malting and told her exactly what he meant to do. The instrument was a good one. Pike renounced for himself and his heirs all claim upon the person, service and maintenance of his wife Hester Pike, the said Hester to be removed forthwith to Uffcombe, there to be maintained for her life at his grace's charge, with 2 women to attend her, and the parish of Sturmarsh discharged of her for ever. £250 paid on execution, and because an attorney is paid to leave no hole in a thing, the recital ran on. Whereas his grace holds the bond of the said Tobias Pike for £180, and whereas the said Delia Wren, servant, passes the said bond into his grace's household, and shall not at any time be chargeable to this parish. Hester was carried to Uffcombe on a feather bed in a covered waggon at walking pace on the 12th of March, into a south room with a fire, a bell, no lock on the door, and a window with the sun in it. And when Delia came in from the floor at 11 that morning, and found her mother sitting up in it, she put her face in her hands and stood like that for a long time. "Thank you," she said, when she could. "I will not pretend. Thank you. You would not have let me." "No," said Delia, "I would not." And you would have been right to do it anyway, and I would have come round to it, and I would have said so. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist, and she was laughing a little. It is the first argument I have ever lost that I am glad to have lost. That was the Tuesday. On the Thursday the settlement was carried to the vestry at Sturmish to be allowed and registered before the overseers, 'cause a parish discharge of a pauper wants it in the book, and a vestry is a public room, and the clerk of a vestry reads an instrument aloud, all of it, every recital. There were 19 men in that room, and the door onto the street was open, and by 3 o'clock it was in the Ram, and by dark it was in every house in Sturmish, that the Duke of Uffcombe had bought Tobias Pike's stepdaughter for £250, and that it was written down, and that the clerk had read out the words she passes with the bond. He found Delia in the Uffcombe malting with the lantern out and the floor cold. "Is it true?" she said. "The words are true. The meaning is not. The words are all anybody will ever have." She was not shouting. She had never once shouted. "Do you know what I have had, Your Grace, these 11 years? One thing. One. Nobody could say I had been bought, because nobody had ever actually paid. He offered me to foy in a parlour and you stopped it, and I was grateful. And I told you that you had bought a piece of paper and not me, and I believed it, and for 4 months I have gone on believing it while you sat in an attorney's office in Sturmish writing it down. Delia." "You paid £180 in November," said Delia Wren, "and £250 in March. You have paid twice over. And I am still the thing you paid for, and now it is engrossed and registered, and read out in a public room to 19 men. And it will be in that parish book when you and I are both dead. Tell me how to mend it." "That is the trouble," she said. "You cannot buy the mending, and it is the only thing you have ever done." She took her mother's hand at the door of the south room for a long moment, and Hester said something to her that Silas did not hear. Then she went out to the yard, and she said one sentence to him, and it was, "I resign my place, Your Grace. Have the guinea a week made up to Friday and give it to Mrs. Ivans for my mother's account." She was at the Sturmish carrier's by 6 the next morning, with the marbled book, the day books of 6 years, and her father's old malt house key, and she had left no word for him of any kind, and it was 9 days to Lady Day. "She is at the Ram," Mrs. Ivans said on the 3rd day. "In the little room over the arch, at 4 shillings a week, and she has paid a fortnight in advance out of the boot money, and she has been at the attorney's in Bridge Street every morning at 9. Has she sent anything?" "No, Your Grace." "Has she asked anything?" "She asked me," said Mrs. Ivans, "to tell you not to come." He did not go. It was the hardest fortnight of his life, and he counted afterwards as the first thing he had ever done for her that cost him something he could not draw on a bank. Her mother sat up in the south room at Uffcombe with the sun on the counterpane and did the mending by touch and would not be drawn. "She told me where a thing was," Hester said once. "That is all you are having out of me, Your Grace." She has waited 11 years to fetch it herself, and she will not thank either of us for carrying it downstairs for her. Lady Day, the 25th of March, was a bright cold Thursday, and the vestry at Sturmish met at 11 in the room behind the church with the overseers, the churchwardens, the constable and 2 magistrates who would sit afterwards on the business of Mr. Foy's creditors. Silas Bray went in at 5 past and stood at the back against the panelling, and took off his hat, and did not sit down, and did not speak for 2 hours. Delia Wren came in at 11 exactly with a tin box and a bundle of daybooks under a strap. "Gentlemen, I ask to be heard before you close the book on the year." "On what matter, Miss Wren?" "On the instrument that was read in this room on the 11th, and on Mr. Pike's claim to the lease of the Wren malt house, which I understand is to be sold this afternoon to satisfy Miss Foy's creditors." "They are the same matter, and I will be as quick as I can be, and I ask nobody to speak for me." "First," said Delia, "I ask the clerk to read the recital again." The whole of it, and slowly, and in the same voice he used on the 11th. Nobody had expected that. The clerk read it. "Whereas the said Delia Wren, servant, passes with the said bond into his Grace's household." Silas stood at the back and heard his own money read out loud in a public room, and made himself listen to every word of it, and did not look away. "I cannot strike that out," said Delia. I have taken advice, and I am told the parish book is the parish book. Very well. Then I ask that my answer be entered underneath it, in my own words, and signed by me, so that whoever opens this book in 50 years reads them together. Write this: that Delia Wren was not conveyed, sold, given, nor purchased. That no money paid by any man to any other man has ever bought 1 hour of her. That the £250 was paid for her mother's release from a locked room, and that she is glad of it and does not ask it back. And that she came into this room on Lady Day of her own accord, on her own feet, and put her name to this with her own hand. She signed it. The clerk turned the book round and she wrote her name, and it took her 4 seconds, and it was the same clear round hand she used for the day books. Now, she said, Mr. Pike's claim to the malt house. Pike was on his feet at once, easy and injured, with Foy's attorney beside him. The malt house at Sturmish has been in my occupation 11 years, since I married the widow Wren. The lease is mine as her husband, and the trade is mine, and my stepdaughter has been maintained in that house out of charity. The lease, said Delia, is not in your name and never was. She opened the tin box. My mother has kept these under her bed for 11 years, and she could not carry them down a stair, and by the time I was old enough to be told, she could no longer see to find them. On the 12th of this month, when she was carried out of that house, she told me which board it was under. This is the lease of the Wren malt house, 21 years from the death of my father, granted to Hester Wren, widow, Wren gentleman, not Pike. The lease is 9 years older than that marriage, and this is my father's will, proved at the registry in the year I was 13. The malt house is left to my mother for her life, and after her to me. Mr. Pike has occupied it as her husband. He has never owned so much as the door. The room made a low noise. Foy's attorney sat down. And the second paper, said Delia. My father left me a portion of £180 in the Sturmish Bank to be paid to me at 1:20. I am 4:20. I have never had a farthing of it. Here is the bank's receipt for the withdrawal of that sum in the year I was 19, and here is the name on it, Delia Wren, her mark, and a cross drawn beside it. She held up the day book of 6 years in her other hand and let it fall open. Gentlemen, my father taught me my letters when I was 6 years old, at that kiln, out of a malt tally. I have written every entry in that house for 11 years and every entry at Uffcombe for 4 months, and I have signed for a guinea a week in a duke's own office. There is not a man in Sturmish who has had a bill from that malting in my hand and thought it was written by a woman who signs with a cross. That is my money, said Delia Wren, £180. My father left it to me, and my stepfather drew it out on a mark I have never made in my life, and lost it to Mr. Foy across a table, and then in November offered me to Mr. Foy to settle it. I was sold, she said, with my own portion. He had already spent me once before he tried to sell me. At the back of the room, against the panelling, Silas Bray heard the whole of it and understood, with a coldness that started at the back of his neck, precisely what the bond in his strong box was, and what he had paid £180 for in a cold parlour in November. Feeling generous. Mr. Pike will be committed to the sessions, said the older magistrate, on the matter of the mark and the money, and the constable will keep him until the papers are drawn. Mr. Foy's creditors have no claim on a lease that was never his debtors. Miss Wren, the malt house is yours, and this bench is sorry it has taken 11 years to say so in a room where anybody could hear it. Thank you, sir. The bond is mine, said the Duke of Uffcombe from the back of the room, and I ask leave to bring it up. They made way for him. He put it on the table, a folded paper, 4 months old, £180, endorsed to him at 4 o'clock on the 11th of November by a frightened man in a hurry. I bought this in a cold parlour, he said, in about 90 seconds, and I have never in my life felt so satisfied with myself as I did walking out of that house. I thought I had bought a woman's freedom. I had bought a bad debt from a debtor with money that was, it now appears, hers to begin with, and I never once asked whose £180 hounds it had been before it was Mr. Pike's, because it did not occur to me that money had a history. Money has always come to me without one. I cancel the bond. That is nothing. It costs me a debt I would never have collected, so I will pay it a second time to the person it belonged to. He counted it out on the vestry table, in gold, £180, in front of the overseers and the churchwardens and the constable and 19 men of Sturmush, and pushed it across. Miss Wren, your portion, as your father left it, 4 years late. I have paid twice over, said Silas. The first time I paid the wrong man and thought myself generous. This is the payment. The other was only money. I will take it, she said. It is mine. And she swept it into the tin box without ceremony, which was, he thought, the most complete acquittal he was ever going to get. It does not, said Silas. I have one more entry for your book, and I will sign it, and I ask that it be written directly under Miss Wren's, on the same page where it cannot be read without her answer beside it. Your Grace, said the older magistrate, the bench would as soon have the recital expunged altogether. It was an attorney's form of words. There is no need for. There is every need. Do not expunge it. He waited until the clerk's pen was ready. Write, that the words she passes with the bond were engrossed in an instrument prepared at my direction, that I read them before I execute it, and did not strike them out, because I did not think they mattered, that they were read aloud in this room to 19 men, and that Miss Wren, who had nothing whatever to do with the writing of them, paid for them in this town for a fortnight, while I 9 miles off and did not come. Signed Uffcombe. Let it stand in the book as long as the book stands. He signed it. The clerk blotted it. And that entry is in the Sturmush parish book to this day, 4 lines under hers, and there is a family in that town who will still show it to strangers. He did not speak to her afterwards. She had asked nobody to speak for her, and he was not going to make himself the last word on a morning that had been entirely hers. He put on his hat and rode home. The Wren malt house at Sturmush reopened on the 1st of May, with the steep intake moved above the weir, the flue swept, and a new board over the door on which the sign writer had painted, at the direction of the owner and at her expense, D. Wren, Maltster. Hester Pike, who signed herself Hester Wren from the day the will was read, and dared anybody to argue, was carried back in June to a south room over the yard, with a window, a bell, no lock and the sun in it. 2 years of a back room, she said. I have earned the front. Silas came on the 10th of June, at 4 in the morning, because that is when a malt floor is turned, and he had learned that much at least, and he took a shovel off the wall and worked the length of it beside her, without saying anything at all, until the pail came up over the Sturmush roofs. You told me once, he said, to ask you something that was not about money. I did. I have been 3 months finding a question with no money in it. It is remarkably difficult. I have caught myself at it twice a week. He set the shovel against the wall. Delia, I am not offering you anything. You have a trade, a lease, a house, a portion and name over your own door, and the county knows what you did in that vestry, and there is nothing in my gift that you have not got or could not get. I am asking whether you would have me, not what I own. I have found out this spring what I am when the thing cannot be bought, and I was not much use, and I would rather learn it properly with you than stay comfortable without you. Delia Wren leaned on the sill with the lantern between them and the barley going over, and the smell of hot stone and smoke. That is a good question, she said. It took you long enough. It did. Ask my mother's leave before you go, or I shall never hear the end of it. She put her hand over his on the sill, warm and scarred and entirely steady. Yes, Silas. They were married in Sturmush in the autumn, from the malt house, and the whole corn hall came, and the old magistrate gave her away, and Mrs. Ivans cried again and denied it. She never gave up the trade. Uffcombe malt and Wren malt went to market under the 2 names for 30 years, and the Wren was reckoned the better, and the Duke of Uffcombe said so in public, whenever anybody was foolish enough to ask him. And in the little marbled book, under 6 years of dates and sums and the words not paid, the last page is ruled off in a clear round hand, and under the rule it says onleaved, in full, the whole of it, D.W.